In the first years of NATO's existence, the alliance's fighter forces were defined by rapid transitions from wartime piston aircraft to practical jet-powered day fighters, shaped as much by industrial reality as by doctrine. The North American F-86 Sabre emerged as the closest thing to an early NATO standard, valued for its swept-wing performance, high-altitude capability, and suitability for large-scale deployment across multiple air forces. Alongside it, the Hawker Hunter represented Britain's answer to the same requirement, combining strong transonic performance with reliability that made it an enduring day fighter and early air defense workhorse well into the 1950s. France pursued an independent but parallel path with the Dassault MD 450 Ouragan, an early straight-wing jet that re-established domestic fighter production and formed the baseline for later developments. That progression continued with the Dassault Mystère 4, which introduced transonic performance and improved climb and interception capability, becoming a major French contribution to NATO fighter strength. Reinforcing commonality across the alliance, the Canadair Sabre provided Canadian-built production of the F-86, ensuring supply resilience while equipping European NATO air arms with identical frontline fighters. Together, these aircraft defined NATO's first cohesive jet fighter generation. By the mid-1950s, NATO air defense doctrine shifted decisively toward all-weather interception, driven by the growing threat of long-range Soviet bombers and the limits of visual-range fighters. The Northrop F-89 Scorpion reflected this transition in North American service, pairing onboard radar with dedicated interception tactics to enable round-the-clock air defense under controlled conditions. That logic matured with the Convair F-102 Delta Dagger, one of the first fighters designed from the outset as a radar-guided interceptor within the SAGE network, optimized for rapid climb and missile-based engagements rather than maneuvering combat. Britain pursued a parallel solution with the Gloucester Javelin, a twin-engine all-weather interceptor that bridged gun-era fighters and the emerging missile age while anchoring UK air defense through the late 1950s. France's Dassault Super Mystère B2 occupied a different but related role, serving as a transonic fighter that improved interception performance while marking a national step toward sustained Mach 2 capability. The interceptor concept reached its Cold War peak with the Convair F-106 Delta Dart, a highly specialized, high-performance air defense fighter built solely to defend North American airspace, illustrating both the power and the narrow focus of the radar interceptor era. In the late 1950s and into the 1960s, NATO fighter forces moved into sustained supersonic flight while alliance planning increasingly linked tactical aviation to nuclear delivery responsibilities. The North American F-100 Super Sabre fit this posture as a supersonic fighter bomber, valued less for air combat than for its qualified emphasis on fast, low-level strike tasks within NATO's tactical strike framework. The Lockheed F-104G Starfighter represented a more explicitly dual-purpose approach in European service, a NATO-focused variant adapted for both interception and fighter-bomber duties, with national air forces balancing its speed and climb against operational demands. Britain's English Electric Lightning was far more specialized, a point defense interceptor built for rapid reaction alert and high-altitude interception in UK air defense rather than broad multirole work. France's Dassault Mirage 3 brought Mach 2 performance to a fighter interceptor format, combining speed, climb, and modern weapons integration in a design that later entered NATO service beyond France. Italy's Lockheed F-104S further narrowed the starfighter concept toward air defense, an interceptor-optimized development emphasizing radar and missile capability, illustrating how the same basic platform could be steered toward distinct NATO missions. By the late 1960s, NATO began to standardize around large, twin-engine multirole fighters that could absorb new radar and missile systems while also carrying meaningful strike loads. The McDonnell Douglas F-4 Phantom II became the core backbone of this approach, serving across multiple NATO air arms as a single platform that could be tasked for air defense, escort, and deep strike according to national doctrine and basing realities. France pursued a parallel but independent solution with the Dassault Mirage F-1, an air defense and multirole fighter that combined modern avionics with sustained performance for interception while remaining flexible enough for national strike requirements, later appearing in Spanish NATO service as well. Within the Phantom family, the McDonnell Douglas F-4F reflected a NATO-optimized German configuration path, tailored around local modernization choices and weapons integration while retaining the Phantom's basic multi-role character. Britain's McDonnell Douglas F-4K/M variants adapted the same airframe to UK needs, shaped by fleet and air defense requirements and the transition from carrier operations to shore-based missions. Taken together, these aircraft defined a common NATO pattern: heavy multi-role fighters capable of meeting both air defense and strike commitments without requiring separate specialized fleets. During the 1970s and 1980s, NATO's fighter forces relied not only on heavy multi-role types, but also on lightweight aircraft that multiplied presence and readiness at manageable cost. The Northrop F-5A/B Freedom Fighter fit this numbers fighter logic, offering a straightforward lightweight fighter suited to air policing, quick reaction tasks, and the dispersed basing concepts NATO expected in wartime. Canada's Canadair CF-5 extended that role through licensed production, a NATO light fighter variant that preserved the F-5 simplicity while sustaining domestic supply and providing an adaptable platform for both training and operational commitments. The concept matured in the Northrop F-5E/F Tiger II, an improved development included here as a qualified later-generation air defense utility, with better performance and sensors that made it more credible in the interception role while retaining the type's economy. Alongside these lightweight fighters, the Dassault Mirage 5 entered NATO air arms as a qualified strike-leaning Mirage derivative, often employed in a fighter-bomber role rather than as a pure interceptor. Together, these aircraft complemented heavier fleets by spreading coverage, sustaining pilot pipelines, and ensuring that NATO could field capable fighters in quantity without treating every mission as a job for the most complex platforms. Within NATO, naval air defense imposed its own definition of what a fighter needed to be: long-range detection, missile control, and the endurance to protect a moving fleet rather than fixed airspace. The McDonnell Douglas F-4J/S represented the U.S. Navy's fleet air defense fighter in this era, combining radar and missile armament with carrier suitability to hold a defensive screen beyond the ship's own weapons. And that mission expanded in scope with the Grumman F-14 Tomcat, a purpose-built fleet air defense interceptor designed to counter bombers and missile-carrying threats at distance, using powerful sensors and long-range weapons to extend the carrier group's protective envelope. In British service, the British Aerospace Sea Harrier, FRS-1 and later FA-2 fit as a qualified carrier fighter with a fleet air defense focus, optimized for operating from small-deck carriers and maintaining local air cover over maritime task forces. Together, these aircraft show how NATO's fighter category narrowed and specialized at sea. Less about broad multi-role flexibility, more about persistent interception capability tied to radar and missiles, with carrier operations shaping everything from range and endurance to weapons integration. By the late 1970s, NATO's highest-end fighter requirements returned to the fundamentals of air superiority, shaped by more capable Soviet fighters and the growing importance of beyond-visual range engagements. The McDonnell Douglas F-15A/C Eagle embodied this shift as a dedicated air superiority fighter, combining high performance with a radar and missile suite intended to secure control of the air before other missions could proceed. A parallel top-tier approach existed at sea in the Grumman F-14A/B, included here as a qualified long-range interceptor aligned to fleet defense rather than a land-based NATO standard. Its sensor and weapons pairing was built around detecting and intercepting threats at distance, extending the defensive reach of carrier groups against bombers and cruise missile vectors. as the decade progressed, shed the McDonnell Douglas F-15C in its MSIP-era configuration represented a qualified modernization tranche that kept the Eagle's air superiority role credible through improved avionics, integration updates, and better missile employment. Together, these aircraft illustrate NATO's late Cold War top tier, fighters optimized for detection, engagement control, and decisive advantage in air-to-air combat, with long-range interception remaining a specialized mission set within naval fleet defense. In the 1980s, NATO fighter planning increasingly converged on a common fighter idea. Aircraft built around flexible avionics, standardized weapons integration, and the ability to shift between air defense and strike without changing fleets. The General Dynamics, later Lockheed Martin, F-16A/B became a core NATO standard in this model, combining a modern cockpit and agile performance with the reliability and maintainability needed for high sortie rates across multiple national air forces. As capabilities expanded, the F-16C/D entered service as a qualified upgraded multirole fighter defined by later avionics and weapon integration that improved precision employment and broadened mission options while remaining within the same operational concept. In parallel, the McDonnell Douglas F/A-18A/B Hornet provided a multirole fighter that fit NATO needs across U.S., Canadian, and Spanish service, valued for its sensor integration and the ability to transition between air-to-air and air-to-surface tasks with minimal reconfiguration. France pursued a complementary modernization path with the Dassault Mirage 2000C, fielded as an interceptor and multirole fighter that strengthened national air defense while remaining adaptable enough for broader operational demands. Together, these aircraft illustrate late Cold War NATO standardization. Less reliance on narrowly specialized types, more emphasis on interoperable fighters whose software, sensors, and weapons compatibility could be updated as the threat evolved. As the Cold War entered its final decade, NATO air defense remained a distinct mission with its own requirements: rapid reaction alert, credible radar performance in poor weather, and missile integration that could meet fast-closing timelines. The Panavia Tornado ADV embodied this as a qualified interceptor variant, shaped around dedicated air defense duties rather than the broader strike focus of the Tornado family. On with endurance and radar capability aimed at sustained defensive patrols and controlled interceptions. Several older fighters were kept relevant through carefully bounded modernization programs rather than replacement. The McDonnell Douglas F-4 FICE was a qualified late air defense upgrade that refocused the Phantom on interception, pairing updated sensors and missile compatibility with an airframe originally designed for an earlier era. Italy pursued a similar endgame approach with the Lockheed F-104 SASA and later ASAM, included as a qualified interceptor modernization path that preserved the starfighter's air defense role through avionics and weapons updates rather than structural reinvention. Together, these aircraft marked NATO's last-generation Cold War air defense solutions, a mix of purpose-built interceptors and tightly scoped upgrades that maintained credible interception capability through 1991 while setting the conditions for the post-Cold War shift toward fewer, more standardized multirole fleets.